Okay, so hello and welcome to our world-class operations webinar. My name's Bob, joined by Gary, and we're going to talk. I want to say this. I'm saying operations, and we're obviously going to focus a lot on service delivery, but these principles apply everywhere in your business,
Yes.
right? So we're going to spend some time talking about one of the 5 qualities of a world-class MSP, and being process-driven. Top MSPs, top companies are all process driven, but we're focused on MSPs, so we're going to talk about that specifically. And being process driven is more than just having process or having documentation, right? It's about a commitment to delivering consistent results following a set of built processes, right?
Yeah, and Bob, all 5 of these, if there only had to be 4 qualities of a world-class MSP, we'd make it 4, right? So you got to have 5, but I'm saying 2 on the bottom, number 4 and 5, they're really linked
Right.
because having command is what are the big drivers in my business? The things we're teaching like around macro and micro economics, the service delivery structure, right? Roles, but then within that it becomes process, right? And the things we're going to talk about today that will lead you there. So this is critical. And this particular thing, process driven, it is what separates people that, enjoy their jobs and achieve their goals and have the right culture from those that do a decent job and do okay.
Yeah.
That's that.
It's about, if you want to grow and scale, you have to be able to do it in a repeatable way, and you can't do that without a process.
Yep.
You have to have good people, right? You got to have people who can execute on things that are necessary, but you got to be able to repeatedly do the same results. So,
Yeah. And at the prices that we need to charge today in this business, um, you can't consistently deliver value without process across your customer base.
yeah,
Period.
deliver
And
value
end of story.
or you achieve the same results,
Yep.
no matter who the customer is. So
Same
first thing I
thing.
want to talk about, and these are the principles of process management. And these are things that you can apply in life. This is not specific to MSPs. These are the principles of business process management. And we're going to go through, there's 6 of them. We're going to talk about some examples and give you some perspective on this. So the first thing is all work is process work. If you're not following a process, then you're really just creating things on the fly.
Hmm.
And the process means, positioning those work activities in a larger context of the other activities to get results. So it's, how do I take something, for example, like our ticket management, reactive support, right? That's a process to follow that, but it's also in relation to all of the service that you deliver to try to achieve some end result. So looking at that larger context of creating value for both your clients and the team that's delivering it, that's something that separates the top MSPs, the world-class ones, from the ones that get average results. Being able to deliver repeatable process so that you can have consistency across your clients and the consistent results is the first principle of process management. Um, Number 2, any process is better than no process.
Yeah.
So we get this a lot, right? We run these with Tony Williams, our ops coach, run these operations boot camps, the Profit Accelerator boot camps, and we get to a part where we're talking about building a process for process. And some of the pushback that we'll get is like, well, it's really not a lot that we do there, or that's really difficult, and we have to focus on other things. Having some process, even if it's not what you would imagine it to be the best process, is better than having nothing. Um, Anything else, no process results in just chaos,
It's a
ultimately.
starting point, and then you're going to build on it from here. But you mentioned Tony, like he does these. He's doing like one now. He sees it, but he also does like these one-on-ones where he spends a day and a half as part of his one-on-one operations. And the first thing he does is he finds out the issues that they're having, and then he starts to not talk to just the owners, but he gets and talks to the actual service delivery people. And the first thing he's asking them is around, okay, so around this, what's the process? Can you show me the process? Or he'll ask them, hey, when you hire a new person in this role, can you show me the training? Like he's a
Hmm.
couple places he looks to realize there isn't any process in almost all the people that need help, or there's not enough process. And so you're saying all work is process, and any process is a starting point. It's better than no process.
Right. And when I'm saying process, if having it written down and having it so that people can follow it, that is having a process, not just that it's in your
Yeah,
head and I do the same thing all the time. That's not a process. That's just
and you use it.
remembering what to do. Yeah, and you use it. So you think about when you don't have that, it's inefficiency, it's lost revenue, clients aren't happy, there's frustration, you're not delivering the same service. Or even in, think about in sales. We talk about this in sales all the time, having a sales process, right?
Yeah.
Having a little bit of sales process is better than having none. So number two for principles of process management is anything is better than nothing. And this kind of goes along with it. It might seem redundant or obvious. A good process is better than a bad process. Um, if you have some process in place, uh, some people will look at it and say, well, I don't need to really pay attention to it because the alternative is no process. No, that's not true. The alternative is also possibly making it better and having a commitment to making it better. And sticking with a bad process isn't isn't something that you should do either. Because the results may not be what you need them to be. So having some process, yes, good. Having a good process is better than having a bad process. That's one seems pretty
Yeah,
obvious.
it's like, look, you can relate it to golf, right? If anyone who's a golfer, if you want to golf, I guess a bad golf swing is better than no golf swing. But if you don't work on improving the process, then over time, you just get better at being bad at golf.
Right,
You're grooving a bad golf swing, and that's what you're saying here. You start with a process, then you have to work to, and you're
right.
going to build on this, right?
Yep. Number four is one version is better than many. And we see this a lot too. As
Mhm.
companies start to scale, um, when you're smaller, it's this really may not apply as much as you think. But as you add people to your processes, ensuring that they're following the same one and have not gone off and done a little bit of jazz improvisation on their own, is important. So one version better than many, meaning are we all following the same process? Number one, or number two, have we created variations in our process based on things that maybe are not necessary? So sometimes we'll see like, hey, well, client ABC, they get tickets handled in this way. And client XYZ, they get tickets handled in a slightly different way because they have slightly different needs. You're better off trying to find one version of a process that suits as many people as possible, um, and then managing the exceptions.
So a lot
So,
of times
yeah.
where you see this is you see it in professional services.
Hmm.
One person who does a project gets a different result than a different person who does the same project. You see it in support. Tickets to go to one support person get a different result and then to go to someone different. And, there could be some knowledge and experience that could be involved in it, but many times what we find, we look under the covers, if you really drill into it, there isn't really a defined logic and process that supports the logic, and so it's destined to get different results. And as you scale, it just this is what slows companies down and what's create impact zones.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about exactly as you scale, that these things start to become issues, and the maturity of your process management needs to increase as you scale,
Mhm.
because every person you add doubles the amount of communication lanes in your company, and that's what creates variation. Um,
And that's whether you're going from 10 employees to 20 or
yeah.
1 to 2. It's just,
Yeah, it's much easier on the smaller scale, but we definitely see this and as you go 5,
yeah.
10, 20, 30 employees, and it becomes a challenge. And the companies that are able to manage this are the ones that are able to scale and scale profitably. That's the other thing. Not scaling does not necessarily mean that you're able to scale profitably,
Yeah.
because there's a difference there.
Or have fun doing it.
Yeah, or have fun. Okay, number five, business process principles. Good processes can always be made better. Always, invariably, they can always be made better. You may not always get the same incremental benefit of, working on a process that's really, really well oiled versus one that maybe isn't, but you can always make a process better, especially over time. So spending effort looking at your processes and always trying to improve them should be something that's built into your business, right? And everyone's role is to help make their processes better. Which goes to number 6. Every good process eventually becomes a bad one. It
This is
always
huge.
happens. Yeah, it always happens. We'll see this with people who work with over time is, hey, I spent a lot of effort creating this process. One we like to use as an example is documentation, right? Spent a bunch of time on our documentation. Documentation's great. We got all this stuff. It's up in our wiki or our IT glue, whatever. And good, we're good on documentation. And what we like to say is you have good documentation so long as you keep it up to date, right? If you don't do anything with it after you do that documentation project, it's out of date as soon as you're
So they
done
had a
working on it, right?
process to document all their customers in 3 months, but what's the process for maintaining it, or who's accountable? And when they say, well, everybody's responsible, that means nobody. And so you did it 6 months ago, and now you have 6 months, for the most part, 6-month-old documentation.
Yep.
Because there's no process in place. The other example I give here is when you say every good process eventually becomes bad, it's because everything's changing, right?
Yep.
The process for support desk today is different than it was based on what we support, the technology support, based on your scale. So as everything changes in your business and in our industry, the way we manage security has changed dramatically. The process had to change. Backup.
Uh-huh.
Anything you can mention, the process is different than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
To
you think
some
about
degree or another, it's a little different or it's radically different.
yeah, a good one is alignment. You think about what's happened with alignment over the last
Yeah.
2 years. We've had a lot more external requirements for alignment now. Critical security controls, HIPAA, DFARS, all these different things that we now have to align to. If we had left our alignment process alone as the way that it was, from 2014 or 2016, we would have a bad process for aligning our clients because it wouldn't be meeting the results that we need.
Same with VCIO. That's why you see strategic roadmap now in my IT
Right.
process, because the process required today to provide that role in a more complex environment has to be way more disciplined. So yeah, and that applies to every single process.
Yeah, everyone. Even if it's a good one, it'll eventually be bad because it won't meet the outcomes that you need. So some other considerations for this when we're
Dustin
talking
says
about
process atrophy just like muscles if you don't focus on them.
yeah, you have to have
Atrophy. That's a great word. Bob, we should put that in here. Process atrophy.
oh, okay. Let's start over. We're
Yeah.
gonna adjust some slides. We're gonna go
Thank you,
back.
Dustin. Good one. Okay, they're great principles. Now let's start to drill down.
Other considerations. Who owns the process? And by this, I don't mean who does the process, right? I mean who is responsible for ensuring that the process is running the correct way, that the outcomes that we're expecting are being met, and then also is looking for areas to make improvements. Now, obviously, some of those suggestions for improvements can come from the people who are actually doing the process, but someone has to be responsible to say, like, I know from start to finish, this thing is working the right way. I know our ticket management process, all the steps are being followed, and we're getting the right end results for our clients. I know that our alignment process is, going from A to Z, getting done the right way, and we're incorporating that the feedback back into the process. So who owns the process, and then who also looks at the outcomes for those improvements. And then one other thing that I'll say is if you're a leader in your business, are you focusing your team on the process and creating the process and managing the process, or are you one of the people that come and create chaos inside of those areas?
And that's a manager or a team lead.
It could be any
or an owner.
Right. That's why I've
They're
generalized
the
it
worst
to a
culprit.
leader.
We're the worst culprits.
Yeah, because look, you can get away with that when you're small. And we're relying on a lot of entrepreneurial spirit and a great attitude to get things done. That will get you so far. But as we scale, we need to have more regimented processes that deliver those results. And working with so many MSPs, we see this as a kind of a challenge sometimes to be able to back off and let processes be run, right?
Yeah, and you know what? Think about it this way. Like people come to us and talk to them all the time, and they go, I got a sales problem. I can't sell, or I can't command that price. It's never really a sales problem. You think about it. Like we're in a business where we sell an intangible. The only way to make it tangible is through process, roles, function, and then process supports the function. Those functions supports those roles. That's the True Methods framework. But at the core of it, right? Really, what you're selling is your process, and then your people, their knowledge and experience is really not just what they know about computers, but it's what they know to help develop process that gets better results. And that's what you sell. That's what becomes tangible. And so all the companies we work with that have really high level process driven service delivery and results, none of them have a sales problem, Bob.
No.
Yeah,
And
because
it is what
it's easy to explain it to people.
it's easy to explain, and it's your competitive advantage.
Advantage. Yeah.
There are no other competitive advantages. We say this in a bunch of different ways, but this applies in every business. There's no technology that ultimately is a competitive
Nope.
advantage. They always become commodities, always. Your people, everyone can get people, and
Right.
someone can pay more for better people. People is not really a competitive advantage, and we're not a talent agency. we are we are selling a process that delivers results.
Yeah.
So that has to be how grow through your company. And
Yeah.
Lauren was saying that one of their core values is continuous improvement. Hopefully that's focused on process,
Okay, 10.
continuous improvement of process. But that's one of the considerations. So let's talk about this cycle, and then we're going to kind of organize it this way. There's 4 parts of this cycle of building and managing process: planning, implementation, operation, optimization. And I drew it this way on purpose because it is a cycle. The optimization stuff get put back into planning, and then you continually are rolling this process improvement. So any process has these 4 phases. So, look, this is your unique process to deliver world-class results, right? It's people, process, technology. It's our technology success, right? Standardization, alignment, business impact, strategic roadmap, and then utilizing smart numbers to see, are we moving in the right direction, right? Smart numbers being what's on our
Right.
QBR, but also operational metrics.
Is the process supporting results, right? Right. Both client experience, but also the key metrics within that service delivery area that are going to drive the health of the business.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like we said, your unique process to deliver those world-class results, that's your competitive advantage, right? Being able to deliver that repeatedly. So let's talk about planning here. Um, Planning's got 3 facets: people, process, and technology, for whatever process we're going to talk about. So let's ask yourself, we're looking to do something. Who do I need to do this? Like, what skills are required, and then what's their time commitment? We're looking at, the technology alignment process. What skills do I need for them? How much time are they going to spend doing this alignment, whether it's per client or it's overall? Uh, can we schedule the time commitment from people, or is this something that that is going to come at us? And think about this, like, it's reactive service would be something that we can't schedule, but we still do need a process for reactive service, right? Whereas we can schedule our VCIO, we can schedule our technology alignment. Um, do we need to do this on site, or is it something that we can do remote? That's a decision you have to make about the people. Are they ones that we have to dispatch? Are they ones that we can have in our office? Or are they ones that can be off-site resources that still work remotely but maybe aren't in our office? And then what's the level of customer interaction? When you think about something like centralized services, that's a process that we have. They don't have a lot of customer interaction, whereas someone on the support desk, high level of customer interaction. So that would affect, what type of people we need?
Yep.
And these are all the kinds of questions that we would need to be able to answer to create the job descriptions and look for the right talent to go into those positions.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the process itself, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Like, what do I need to do? How often do I need to do it? How do I get it done specifically? Like, is there tools or technology involved? Or what, how will it be measured? So, like, how do I know that this is operating the right way? And then also always think about, we talk about this in the essence, right? Like what are the essence of the role? What's the essence of the process? What's the customer expecting? Or what are, if this is an internal process, what are we expecting to have
What are we
happen?
expecting? Right.
Right. What is the
I mean,
outcome?
Bob's a good example of this we find. Well, a couple projects is a good one, but
Yeah.
let's talk about for a second like centralized services.
Hmm.
So many people don't have a great. If you talk to any tool, anybody who has a software tool, including us with my IT process, they would tell you the same thing. And I work with all of them, right? Most of their customers utilize less than 20% of the capabilities, right? People just buying tools, right? And instead of really understanding, okay, what are we trying to accomplish with this tool or this one piece of what we're trying to do, and then really drilling down that process to be sure you're getting that end result. For a lot of people, their RMM, which is supposed to reduce risk and reduce tickets, increases their risk and makes things noisier. It has the opposite effect because they haven't gone through each piece of it, and they really haven't developed process and attached, how are we going to measure this?
Yeah.
It's not part of
How
the
is it?
process.
Right. It's not part of the process. Um, and let's think about the end result, because sometimes I think we get stuck on like technical results,
Yeah,
right? So take something like patch management. You go through all this. What do I need to do? I need to update the computers. How often do I need to do it? Like, how is it? I do it through my RMM. How do I measure? I measure patch score, right? And then what is the end result the customer's expecting is not in that their patches are installed.
right,
That's not the end result they're
right,
expecting. They're expecting to use their computers or that their
right.
servers aren't going to have vulnerabilities. That's what they're expecting. So then that also helps inform you back through the process. So thinking about this from whoever the end user, it could be internal, it could be a customer. What is it that they actually expect versus what are our technical goals? And I think that that's an important part there. Um, this is an example like that we've used. I've seen other people have different templates for how they design process. You should have a template for how you create these things. Um, we have one, you can use this, but it's very simple. If you have basic Excel skills, you can put these couple of questions in and you can build out a thing. If you want to make it
Some
more
some
fancy,
people, yeah, and some people do this today, like in a wiki or SharePoint, or they're doing
yeah,
it in their PSA or another tool. There's a bunch of tools, yeah, or
right.
it could be something simple, right?
Yep, yep.
Don't
So
shoot an ant
what,
with an elephant gun.
but have something. Let's go back to our principles. Have something rather than nothing. This is
Right.
something to start with. Could this be better? Sure. Go make it better over time. This is somewhere to start if you have nothing. Um, okay, and then let's talk about technology because you started to allude to a little bit of that. And this is one area where I think you and I kind of go against the grain of the rest of the industry.
Yeah.
I always joke that I'm like the least technology fanciful CTO there is because I'm always skeptical of every piece of technology that's out there.
Yeah.
And I think you and I feel the same way is we want technology that supports business process. Yes, there's a lot of awesome things out there, and there's much more stuff that we can do today than we could 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. But to me, every piece of technology has to prove some business value and have some place in what the results we're trying to deliver. Um, you can go to any show. You can buy 100 tools there with a credit card today. Doesn't cost you really much anything. They'll charge you by the minute to use their tools. But are those things actually advancing our business value? Like you like to talk about, Gary, people switching their RMMs all the time when basically they do the same thing.
Yeah, they're changing RMMs, they're changing backups, they're changing PSAs. When we step back and look at it and say, listen, we have really top performing companies. I mean, top performing in every way, not just in scale, but in efficiencies that use one RMM and one PSA, one backup solution, one security stack. And then we have a bunch of other companies that use the same exact stack that don't get those results. Difference is process, not tools, right? And vice versa. We can have two top performing companies that use a different PSA, a different RMM, a different security stack, but they both are amazing in process and they both get world class results.
World class. Yep. We're not saying that you don't need technology. You do.
No.
And you do need to have the right stuff as well. Good tools, good technology. But I think that a lot of times there's a lens that gets looked through from a engineering perspective. Like, hey, this tool does X, Y, and Z better than the one that we currently have. Well, how much does that translate into actual value for us or for our clients? And having that kind of view, not just, hey, they updated their stack, so we're going to go to the most recent one. And that constant, frenetic changing of tools takes away from delivering actual process value to your clients.
I mean, listen, part of your general tool stack is you need to have an RMM. But I never saw anybody go from being average to anything above average because they went from one of the top RMMs to another.
Mm-hmm.
That
Right.
was never the thing. That changed, direction. You need to have it the same way. You need to have some way of doing your tickets. The same way we feel you need a framework to do alignment in VCIO, and that's why we built, My IT Process, because it's a framework that supports that process. So you do need to have those things. Right? All the key ones. But you should make sure you have process built around each one and that they are getting you the results. I think people get this.
Yeah.
Right? We hammered this.
Yep. But take a look at your technology every 2 years. You should be up to date on what's there. Don't put your head in the sand.
It's moving fast.
This is an example I put together on like the operations planning, right? So what is it we're trying to do? What is the process? Who's involved in it? Like what features do they and skills do they need to have? What technology is involved in it? And what features does it need to have? And then what are the metrics that we're going to use to define that? This isn't your entire process definition. This is just have to
kind of like by area. This is where you start, and then below this you'd have the specific processes.
Yep, for patch management, we use that as an example. There would be a specific document on how it gets done. Remote support, how does it get done? What are the different processes under that? And who does it? And how do we know that it's actually working the right way? This needs to be part of your management process inside your company. And I know we're picking service stuff.
So here's a good example. Both of these are great examples, but listen, doing support is something everyone does, right? Do you know how many questions we get on escalations?
Yeah.
And how many people don't have a process that really matches up and creates more issues? It's like our original business.
Yeah, and those kinds of things are difficult because they're the things that come at you that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
You don't, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do this, but you're not forced to do alignment, right? There isn't anyone calling you demanding that they're aligned.
Right.
No one's saying that. People call and demand support for things, and then you can't fix them. And how do you escalate them? I get why there's questions around it, but you have to think that all those areas have to have focus and process.
The same way they're not calling to asking to be patched or monitored.
Yeah, they're
not calling for that. Yeah.
Or VCIO'd. They're not calling to get VCIO'd.
Yeah.
Right. We're always
Project.
So if you go back in time, we separating that reactive stuff from the proactive stuff is important. Okay, that was the first area of planning.
So we start with a worksheet, right?
Yep.
And now we're going to drill down.
And then how do we implement it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you got to have somewhere to put all this stuff. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me. Just that it's somewhere that your team has access to, no matter where they are, so that they look at your process documentation and that you can refer back to, and that's easily accessible. However you want to do that, there's a million ways. We get asked all the time which one's the best. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Whatever way you're comfortable with, centrally storing that documentation. Um, and making training and communication a part of that. This can't be like, hey, I created this document and send an email to people and like, cool, do this
Right.
from now on.
If you hire a new support desk person, right, or salesperson or any role, and their training process is they're going to shadow someone for a week, you don't have process.
Let's just say that's not a process, right?
That's not a
It's
process,
not a
right?
process.
Yeah, just shadow him, and
The
we're just going
process
to
you
keep
gave them,
watering down and passing down all the mistakes and issues we have. We're just going to keep passing them
yeah,
down to the next
whispered down the
generation.
lane, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
whispered down the lane. The process you handed them for training is step one, sit down in this chair. Step two, watch this person. That's the process. That's not.
and then
This is better than
step three,
nothing.
go get him, Tiger.
Right? Yeah. After 2 hours, you got to get you on the phone.
Let me know
Um,
if you have any questions.
Yeah, but really building training and communication, having a rhythm around it. I know companies do, monthly training sessions where they do their meetings or monthly meeting and they introduce processes. Or if it's something that's a little more intense, they'll create a rollout schedule and a training schedule to implement those things. It has to be built into that as part of the implementation. You can pilot some changes. You say, hey, we're going to try this. This is what we think is going to happen. We're going to take these steps. Let's try it. Uh, let's try a new call handling, right? It's ticket handling when it comes in. We're going to try doing it this way. Let's see what some results are. We'll pilot some and see if we get the results that we want, and then launch
Yeah.
it into your customer base. Training definitely, communication. Do a pilot and then launch that up. Okay, now we have something out there, right? Now we got to figure out, okay, is it doing what we wanted it to do? Like, how do we manage and ensure that this process is achieving the results that we want? Number one is having a dashboard, and I'll get to that in a couple slides here about creating a dashboard. There is dashboard software out there, and I recommend you use it, whichever one you want to pick. If it can reach in and get some information, but I would also say that building your own dashboard where you're creating and tracking your own metrics is also valuable for other reasons. We'll get to that in a second.
Super valuable because some of the things you're going to track may not come out of the systems in exactly the way you want them to. They're not from an API.
Well, it's not even just that. It's also the process of gathering it helps you understand what it means more. So yeah, some of these things can come off of widgets or a dashboard or something that's software, but the dashboard's not just there to say, oh, well, we have X number of tickets on the board. Well, why? Like, why? Where did they come from? What is it about? Why did this go up or go down? So there's some benefit to that. We'll get to that in a second. And then having a system for managing the tasks that are associated with it. Now, the easiest one is tickets and requests, right? People create tickets, then we manage stuff that way. You do have to manage tasks in other ways too, for other delivery areas, and even for sales, accounting, finance, business planning. You gotta have ways to manage your tasks too, and they may not be in tickets, but you should have some way to do that. And then we're gonna talk about time tracking because some people get stuck on this particular part around process.
And I have a theory. I have an evolving theory that I'm going to share.
Go ahead. Why don't you go?
So here's my theory. I think if you've been in the business more than 5 or 6 years, we grew up like that time tracking was the center of everything. Getting our people to, and even well intended, ConnectWise used to say if it's not in ConnectWise, it didn't happen. Well, it did happen. Okay. I'm here to tell you.
It's very metaphysical right now.
Yeah, exactly. It happened. I watched it happen. Here's the point I'm trying to make. With some things where we are today, it's changed. If you're doing professional services still today and you're delivering a project, whether you're doing a fixed fee or whether you're billing hourly, tracking time is really important. It's the unit of measure by which you're billing the customer or by which we've quoted it and have to live within, Bob.
Right. So we're already getting some feedback on this. Yes, if you're delivering, track time for projects, have to do it. And we're not saying don't do it for that because you're just like you said, Garrett, you're billing this. Like that's the unit of measure. So for projects, definitely tracking times and tracking it accurately. On the other side, the other end of this bookend, support. Yeah, you do need to know from an operational perspective, right? How long it's taking you to do certain things, right? And tracking your time accurately is important.
But it's not the most important thing, right? In other words, there's metrics there, right?
Yeah, there's some
And
metrics. Yeah.
so we start, like, let's take that example. So we start at the top metric and say, ultimately, what I care about is how many seats can one resource manage? Like, that determines my cost per seat. And then below that, well, how many tickets get generated based on the number of seats I have? And then how many tickets do people do on average per day? That gets me almost all the way there. If I'm having issues achieving some of those metrics, then I can go look for time anomalies. Hey, show me all the tickets that we spend more than X amount of time on, like, to go look for it. But it's not the first thing we look at. We look at metrics first, then we finally get down to the timepiece. And when you look at the other things here, like a VCIO, if you go to macro and micro economics, we care about how many customers or seats they can manage, ultimately how much MRR they can manage, how much NRR they generate. There's other metrics, and if they're achieving all those metrics, their time entries aren't meaningful, right? It's not what's determining our cost, Bob. And the same thing with technology alignment, and also with centralized services. They're much more metric driven than time driven. So what we're saying is, man, when that happens, process in each of those is super important because that's what drives the metrics.
The process behind it is definitely important. And I would say they're very critical time entries for professional services and support.
Yeah.
For the other delivery areas, look, take technology alignment, for instance. And this is why we did it this way, to assign a resource for a particular amount of time to a client. If they are able to complete what the results are out of that relationship on that on-site day, the time entries for what they're doing aren't as important, I think, is what
Yes,
you're saying.
that's what we're saying.
The
Is everybody with me on this?
the
This
other
is
side
like,
of it, though, is if they're not getting the things done, we're gonna have to go back and look at, like, what are those things that are coming up that's preventing them from
yeah,
doing it. Like, for instance, centralized services is a good one. Like, they got to manage, thousands of endpoints. If they're not able to do some part of it, we have to have some diagnostic way of going and saying, well, what's the issue here? We're not going to bill for it because they're managing a certain number of endpoints, but we got to know, like, what's driving the misalignment and the
yes.
end results.
But this
So
is a real good thing to think about when you're thinking about process, right? This concept of what's important versus time, results, metrics, because you're kind of building your process in each of the functional delivery areas to support that.
yeah, and trying to look, I would love a way to not have to do anything with time. We don't want to do anything with
That's where
time.
we're evolving
We're
to.
trying to break the relationship between this, the time and dollars, right? As much as we can. We're trapped on support and professional
Yeah.
services for the most part, right? The other areas, we have different levers we can pull. And
Yeah.
um,
Now, see, I never would have said that before, but because I was worried Arnie Bellini would get mad at me. But now that he's
I,
sold and
yeah,
got his
still,
wire transfer, I don't think he cares as much. Right? I can go ahead and be free to say whatever I
right,
want.
right.
But in all seriousness, let's not spend any more time on this because we're going to do a webinar just on the changing of moving from time to metrics and process. We'll do a whole webinar just on that.
Yep.
Let's
And
keep
let's
going.
talk and really think about this from a diagnostic perspective. You heard Gary's opinion on, from the leadership perspective overall in the service delivery, right? On the From a person that's sitting in the role, there's still some of these things that you would look at. And if you look down our list of metrics here, how many tickets are open in the queue? We should be definitely looking at that. What's the average age of a ticket? How many tickets are over 30 days old? And here's where I think this is where you're getting to, right, Gary?
Mm-hmm.
Average tickets closed per tech per day. If you can do 12 tickets in a day, do I necessarily care exactly how much time is distributed amongst them?
Yeah.
For some diagnostic reasons, yes. But for the most part, we're getting what we want out of
It's
that
not the most
resource.
important metric. It's only a supporting thing we look at to look for issues or anomalies.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Good.
So there's all this area, and we do this in our boot camp. I mean, Tony does a great
Yeah.
job of creating a dashboard. It's a big part of it. So it's definitely something that you should look into. And you can get these metrics. And so where I was going to say before is you can get these metrics from tools, right? You can build your own, Tableau report or Power BI that gets this information, putting it into a format and regularly reviewing it. Is really important. So developing that dashboard with those smart numbers, looking at it by delivery area or by process or both, making them meaningful. Like I don't like reports that just spit out a bunch of information, and when you pick any number on it, you go, well, what does that number mean? People are like, I don't really know. It goes up and down. I don't know what it means.
Yeah. And
What's the
some of
meaning
them
behind
might not be, they might not be absolutes, but the trends are meaningful.
it? Yeah, and everyone should
So you got to
know
decide which is which.
right. And look, what I always say when developing a dashboard is pick more numbers and look at them and then narrow it down as you go, as
To the
we're
least
able to
amount
spot.
possible. Yeah.
Yeah, to the ones that are the most meaningful. Who's accountable for them? One, that they are the way they are, and who's accountable for getting them? And then what rhythm are you using? Building a rhythm. So when I say rhythm, part of your meeting rhythm, right? We're reviewing the operations dashboard every week. We're looking at, different trends every month, maybe ones that last longer. Maybe there's ones we look at every day. I mean, there's probably a
Daily,
few
right?
sets
Our
of numbers
huddle,
that you
right?
want to look at every day and say, look, we have this many tickets on the board, we got this many escalations, and
I
here's
closed this
our
many tickets
yeah, close this
yesterday.
many tickets. Like building that rhythm around metrics is important. And then based on reviewing those metrics and measurables, how do you optimize your processes? So I want to, generate less tickets in a day. Okay, well, what processes do I need to change to affect the number of tickets? I got to go
Hmm.
do this different kind of alignment. I have to put this different software or technology out there. We have to change our process and how we handle
Yeah.
things.
Like one thing we did when we dealt with that, one big process change, we implemented a process for each month at our first MSP where we had a team that reviewed tickets and alerts by categories to look for opportunities where we could either put new things into our standards or our automation that would eliminate those things. So that was a process that we didn't have. And it evolved. The way we started that process and what we looked for, it changed over time as we matured, right, and got higher up the stack. But there's a process we put in place, and the result was that 5 years later, we had 7,000 endpoints and only 1,400 tickets, right? And it all started with a process that we matured over time. There's an
Hmm.
extreme example of what a process can do in a business.
Yep. Okay. So internal feedback, customer feedback, and build it into your rhythm, and put all that stuff back into your process. Again, this can't happen unless you have a process owner, someone who knows that this is okay. Well, we're going to get this information, and then we're going to give it to the who owns that process, and they're going to figure out, okay, well, how do I optimize this? All right, so that's the cycle. What is this kind of business process management? That's the impact on world-class operations. And number one, we want efficiency. That reduces noise. We want to escape the reactive spiral of death, and we want to be more proactive. We will be process managers, right? Managing those client expectations, uh, delivering the results that we're promising them. So we start this relationship in sales. We're going to set some expectations in sales. We're going to carry it through the organization. We got to be able to deliver that in a consistent way. So if we're not living up to the expectations that the sales is setting, we're obviously not going to have happy clients who are going to pay us premium to be on our service. So this is something that we need to continually do. Being able to scale with predictable results, having a profitable company and an amazing culture. And then you like to say this one, Gary, getting A results from B players. And that's, look, if we have really good tight process, we can put people in a position to succeed maybe above their batting average a little bit, right? And we see that, one of the reasons we made My IT Process was to put technology alignment engineers into a position that they can be successful.
And
Wasn't
now
always
VCIOs. Right.
Yeah, and same thing with
Yeah.
VCIOs, that we can put them into a process that is repeatable and that we can get very good results from. without having to rely all on personal experience and knowledge. We're creating an environment for them to succeed.
When I think of business, Bob, I think it in three things. So let's talk about the MSP business. At the top level is framework or structure, right? Like that's what we teach in macro and micro economics. Okay. Then below that is having defined roles and functions, right? And then below that is the process that supports them. So if you can hit all three of those levels and tie them together, and what we're talking about is where the rubber meets the road with the process. That's the top 20% of our industry at any scales, at any size, whether you manage 300 seats or 3,000 or 30,000.
Right. Good. Okay. That's it. Quality number 4 of being a world-class MSP, being process driven. There's obviously more depth to this. I think giving you some principles to think through, and then using those principles as guidelines is helpful. This isn't really rocket science. I mean, we're not inventing the new internet here. This is just work.
So where do you start? Like, let's go on to the summary, Bob, and show some
Yep.
help we can give. So if you're an owner, right, business leader, you should start with macro and micro economics. Ultimately, your functions, your roles, and your process should lead up to the results you want in terms of driving scale and profitability. If you're in service delivery, we have awesome Essence videos and service delivery area videos for every delivery area. If you're in sales, the same thing. We have outside and inside sales videos. So, but also, if you think you're lacking in process, one of the things, like when in our operations boot camp, we try to get people to say, listen, pick some areas where process would have the most impact. Technology alignment, VCIO, centralized services, any one of the delivery areas, okay? And then each quarter, look and say, okay, start with what Bob showed you, which is in each of those areas. Bob, what you had laid out was kind of like at a high level, the planning worksheet. Start with the planning worksheet. So you can start to say, okay, here's where we got to get to. This quarter, let's pick this deliverable, this and these two processes, and let's work on those each quarter. And maybe another team can work and just work on a couple each quarter. And then over time, you'll get to all of them. And then by the time you do, it's time to go back and cycle through them every 12 to 24 months. You'll be able to go back and cycle through. Don't just say, well, this quarter, we're going to have a process for everything. No, you're not.
Right. Pick some high impact areas, I think, is great advice.
And then learn about, hey, we did this. We should change the way we do process in general and the way we review it. And
yeah, there's some easy areas too. Like if something's a simple process, just having it documented is good. And having it somewhere that they can reference is good.
And then when things go wrong in your business, like we do here, when something goes wrong, the first thing we do is go, okay, so how did this happen? Can we go back to the process? Did we work outside the process? Does the process need to be changed? And we want to go, every time an issue comes up, we want to know the answer, like, to that question. Like, okay, we have a process so this won't happen, and it happened. So was it human error? Did we go out? Which of the three things in it so it won't happen again? Is it a training issue? Do we have to change the process?
Yeah, did we not design the process for that particular thing? Okay, is it something that's going to happen all the time, or that we should be aware of it? And I think that that rhythm, you put that in place, you start to permeate that through the organization. You start to get better results. You get other people developing these things or helping develop them, and having suggestions and taking some responsibility for what their function is inside of the larger process delivery. So definitely everyone in the, we talked a lot about service delivery here, but this applies to sales as well. There's an inside sales process. There's an outside sales process. There's a reason we created the outside sales worksheet, because it's a process that you follow through. And did we follow the process?
And you know what? it's every area, and the more proactive it is, the more important the process is. Man, as we're starting now, like we're working much closer with many VCIOs since we launched strategic roadmap inside my IT process. And Bob, what our member success people are uncovering is most MSPs have a very, very loose process around VCIO. They're even surprised once we talk about how they're going to implement it, how loose that process is. And it's one of the main conduits of value, right? And then that leads to what supports it. Then we get to alignment where the process is. And then that leads to some of the, maybe they're dealing with too much reactive stuff. And that gets us back to the process around support desk. And then they're saying they're dealing with too many things that are coming from centralized services. And then they're saying that they're dealing with things after projects get put in to create noise, because you start at VCIO and it cascades down, and it leads you to all the other areas where there's process that are creating symptoms. Good. Is this helpful for everybody? Is this making sense to everybody who's on today? We have a pretty nice crowd on today.
I think so.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
Good stuff, Bob?
Yeah. Do we have any
questions? Yeah. Do you have any additional questions, people?
You know, Lauren mentioned, and I think this is a great rule, the 20-80 rule, not the 80-20 rule. Put in 20% of the effort to get 80% of the way there. That does, look, get something, get it close. Start there. I mean, I'm guilty of this a lot too, can't make it the best. So, they call it the Nirvana fallacy.
Well, I opened with this saying, don't shoot an ant with an elephant gun.
Right.
Sometimes you can overcomplicate a process and then people don't look or use it. Start with just the pieces of it and the steps that are critical to making it happen, and then add or subtract as you review that process over time.
Yep.
So
good. Okay.
All right, Bob.
That's it. We're done. We're before 3 o'clock. I'll let everyone go.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes to spare. So yeah, good job, man. So I'm hoping everybody takes this to heart. Just start with, if you're overwhelmed by this, just pick one thing. Pick one item and work on it.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
The first one's the hardest.
Right.
The first couple are the hardest. And then once you start to see it, it's like a muscle, right? And then additional processes and your team gets involved and they get excited, and it really starts to gain momentum, and you can put some themes around it and have some fun with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
So again, you can look. Bob, we'll do a webinar recap and a podcast for this coming up next week, and then as always, all of our webinars, the most recent ones, will be posted on the homepage of the portal, and then this will be in the service delivery track.
Yep, it'll be in service delivery. Yeah, and it'll be on the right-hand side of the portal as well.
Yeah.
We always list the last 4.
Let's see, maybe a couple more questions come in here. Someone asked a question. It's not really. I'll just take 1 minute and answer it, since we have time. Okay. Maria asked, "Can you help calculate a min for MRR? Is this appropriate question for this?" It doesn't really apply to this, but I'll answer the question since we're here. So everyone should set a minimum MRR amount, and it's kind of has to do, Maria, with where you are in your maturity in terms of your value proposition and where you are. What I would say is the goal of it is to raise your average MRR. So, hey, today if your average MRR is only 2,000, maybe you'd start with a minimum of 1,500. If your average MRR, is 3,000 or 4,000, that number might be, 2,000 for you. And it may take you time to raise that. You may go from 1,500 minimum to 2,000 to 2,500. So you want to start, right, with something that achieves its goal, which is to put a minimum in place that over time is going to, raise your minimum. and raise your average MRR. And then over time, as you build your process, as you build your technology success process, you build your value that you deliver, and you raise your own seat price, you'll be able to also raise your average, your minimum MRR. So hopefully that answers that.
Yep.
All right, man.
Good. If there's any other questions that we didn't get to, then just send them to support@truemethods.com or go into Ask True Methods on the portal. We'll answer them there.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks.
Great job, Bob. Have a great day.
Yep. Take care.